wrote this out because I wanted to say it right, but like, is the case strong enough to justify an indictment of the leading candidate to challenge the president?
All right, everyone, welcome back to the LOOPcast, where we cover faith, culture, and politics from a Catholic perspective. And I'd like to speak, first off, thank you. Thank you to everyone who's been tuning in. Something that you can really do to help us, and I'm going to start up top, reviews. If you leave a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, hit us in the inbox, loopcast@catholicvote.org. It really helps us out a ton. If you've been listening for a while, haven't subscribed, haven't emailed in, or haven't rated us, really appreciate if you do so now. But we have a lot to talk about this week, and we're starting off with a very high-profile indictment. We're going to talk Trump indictment. I know a lot of people maybe are confused as to what's going on. Trump's been kind of in and out of indictments, it seems. Erica, you did a lot of research on this. What is going on for all the people out there that are like, what's going on with Trump?
Sure. So it gets a little confusing with multiple indictments going on, but this week, this was the big one. Trump pled not guilty to 37 charges of a federal indictment, including, among other things, willful retention of national defense information, as well as charges related to obstruction and making false statements about what kind of material he had at specifically Mar-a-Lago. And the meat of the indictment was really these 31 separate counts against Trump for violating the 1917 Espionage Act. And I spent some time going through all of the pages of the indictment, and I picked out just a couple of the most egregious charges, and the indictment actually includes the evidence that they're bringing forward. And so what we see, among other things, is in July 2021, Trump had at his golf club in New Jersey, he recorded a meeting with a writer, a publisher, and 2 members of his staff, none of whom had security clearance. And you can see in the script from the recording, he's showing and describing a, quote, plan of attack that had been prepared for him by the Department of Defense and a senior military official against a foreign nation. And Trump is telling the individuals, he's telling the reporter and the publisher that this plan is, quote, highly confidential and, quote, secret. Trump says, quote, as president, I could have declassified it. He apparently didn't. And, quote, now I can't, but this is still a secret. So it's, he's clearly made some egregious errors here. And he's caught on, he's caught on audio recording actually saying this to people. And this is sort of the one that's gone viral, but there are 31 in total charges along these lines. And you'll also find photographs in the indictment of these boxes of classified documents, America's state secrets being stored in a Mar-a-Lago bathroom, which is a very nice bathroom. I mean, it's
Gold
much
toilets.
larger than mine.
Yeah.
Mar-a-Lago bathroom, little crystal chandelier, a ballroom, and even a locker next to a liquor cabinet, of course. So he instructs his lawyers, also in another charge, to lie to the FBI. He says to his lawyer, wouldn't it be better if we just told them we don't have anything here? So it's a pretty damning indictment. And I just wanted to walk out that Espionage Act of 1917, sometimes confused with the Sedition Act, but they've been used together. Other people who've been charged under the Espionage Act include Julius and Ethel Rosenberg. Josh will remember them well from his childhood. Julian Assange, Ed Snowden, and Chelsea Manning.
I'm really hoping that you don't ask me who Julius and Ethel Rosenberg is.
So, Tom, history quiz. No, I won't put you on the spot there, man. We're focused on the present right now.
He gave the bomb to the Ruskies, and they deserve to get the death penalty.
I knew that.
Right.
Yep.
But of course, Trump, he's characterized it this week on his way to the courthouse in Miami. He was on Truth Social saying, quote, it's a witch hunt. He's saying this is, I'm being targeted. Of course, comparisons come up with the lack of investigation into figures like Hunter Biden, Hillary Clinton, and even Joe Biden himself. All of these, this sort of 2-tier justice system being very much at the forefront of the Trump, the way they're framing the narrative. And of course, the way the left is framing the narrative, for those of you who have relatives watching CNN, you'd think there was nothing else going on in the world. It's all Trump all the time on these 24-hour talking head shows. But the way they're framing the narrative is, no one is above the law. Finally, justice for the most elite among us, for Donald J. Trump. And that's pretty much the summary of where we're at today. It's going to be a long process. It's expected that his lawyers are going to ask for a stay of the actual trial until after the 2024 election. We'll see how that plays out over the next few months, but this is only just the beginning of what's going to be a really long news cycle. And so get
Well,
ready.
and Trump defenders have the right to say, hey, you didn't prosecute Hillary, which I totally agree. Why did that
egregious.
never happen?
Right.
I think it was egregious. And, her apologists are like, oh, but her emails, as if
Like it's a
dude,
joke.
she
Yeah,
had her emails
it's
on a
not a
private
joke.
server. She had her emails on a private server, and the things that she was doing was, again, top secret documents at her house. I mean, it rings true a lot like this. I think in both cases, both Trump and Hillary were egregious with the state secrets. And just because you're the president doesn't mean you can just have state secrets in like a hotel bathroom, even if it's under lock and key. It's like plans for how you would invade a certain country, like that should not be accessible to the public. That's got to be secure. So, I get that. I mean, so Trump defenders, they haven't really said he didn't do anything wrong, which is kind of like the defense with the Ukraine. There was look, he was just calling this country to say, get with the program. So they were making a case with Ukraine that he did nothing wrong. They're not making the case here that he did nothing wrong, because I really don't see how you can make that case with a straight face. He screwed up. He just, I don't know, like some people say it's like he wanted to have like tchotchkes, like little victories that, hey, I was president. Look
Right.
at these files. It's like,
It was like bragging rights.
you
Yeah.
can't do that, dude. This is
No,
not okay.
not a
So
game.
now the problem is we've sort of poisoned the well here in that Hillary Clinton gets off scot-free. There's so many people like, Ron DeSantis made the point. He was a Navy guy, JAG, and he's like, if I would have done that, had all these classified documents in my house, they would have thrown me in jail. And he's right. And so why didn't they go after Hillary for this? Isn't it, I thought no man's above the law. Well, shouldn't Hillary Clinton also not be above the law?
Well, you can lump in Joe Biden too. I mean, Joe Biden had those documents strewn about his Corvette in his garage.
Mhm.
I mean, that's also kind of crazy.
Yeah, I mean, and Mike Pence had some documents as well that he shouldn't have had. The question is, like when the feds show up and they say, we think you have documents at your domicile, at your house, and they're not secure and they really shouldn't be there, what do you do? Biden and Pence gave up the documents, whereas Trump was like stonewalling and trying not to participate. And the feds were just like, hey, we just want these back. It didn't seem like a total, prosecution there. They just wanted the files back, and Trump kept stonewalling, and then they got him on audio saying, gosh, maybe I should just say they're not here. It's like, that's not helpful. Like, we're
Yeah,
talking about
so
precious
dumb.
documents the Defense Department's put up. We don't want these to get out on the open. What if some employee in Mar-a-Lago runs into these and starts posting pictures of this stuff on the internet or something like that? You just can't have this. So
Right. My question now is, because Biden indicted his biggest opponent here, and I think that's what most people identify, you can still see that Trump did something wrong, but you can also see this as an administration punishing its biggest opponent, which Trump is right now, according to all the polls. Is this now going to become status quo for every administration that gets elected to punish its biggest competitors or enemies on the other side of the aisle?
I mean, that's the scary thing, right? That's why the question here is, is the case strong enough? And I wrote this out because I wanted to say it right, but like, is the case strong enough to justify an indictment of the leading candidate to challenge the president in the next year's election by the sitting president himself? We have an incumbent president prosecuting his biggest political opponent. And of course, so for example, the New York Times this morning was saying, well, yeah, of course it's justified because Trump did something wrong, which is what we've been saying, right? That yes, clearly there was some egregious, very vain, and if not malicious, at least very stupid stuff that Trump did with these documents. Does it rise to the level of justifying Biden, using his DOJ to prosecute him on these charges? It's a scary question, right? I mean, yeah.
yeah, I just think we
ran
poisoned the
out of
well by
thoughts.
not going after Hillary. I just think that's the
Yeah.
biggest problem.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have a good chunk of the population that's just not going to trust anything on this because they think it's a two-tier justice system. In many ways, they are right. that it is a two-tier justice system. And the next president of the United States needs to clean house at the FBI and DOJ. Like we see examples of this. Like, the Biden administration has, and the Justice Department have not gone after all these people who are attacking churches and causing vandalism and all that stuff. And then they throw the book at someone like Mark Hawk. So my point would be, why isn't Trump and Hillary treated similarly? Because they both had similar problems where they had top secret documents at their domicile that were not supposed to have. So was the problem that Trump didn't, get out the hammer and the bleach and destroy the documents? He probably could have, right? Just destroyed all the documents at the Mar-a-Lago fire. And then when the feds come, they're like, oh, I guess there's nothing here. I mean, clearly the federal government wants to make sure that these documents don't get out and that they're secure. So I get that. But I really think, obviously, Trump should have returned the documents when they were first requested. But it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to try to get Americans to believe that we have a true rule of law if you don't go after Hillary and you go after Trump. I just don't get it.
Well, and this was interesting. Like, how are we going to get Americans to think that somehow this is a just prosecution of Trump right now? Well, I was, again, reading the New York Times this morning, the gift that keeps on giving. The argument that was being put forward was that, well, with people like Hillary and Joe Biden, it's clear that they did not have an intention to break the law. With Trump, it's clear that he intended to. And my question to that is, first, how do we know? Where's the evidence that there was no intention to break the law, or that they did? Because there was never a deep dive prosecution of it. I mean, James Comey was just like, I was reading his 2016 statements about Hillary, and he says, although there's evidence of potential violations of the statutes regarding the handling of classified information, our judgment is that no reasonable prosecutor would bring such a case. And again, like, how does he know the intention behind it if there was never, ever, a deep dive investigation on it? They just dropped it, right? And so, again, like, if they're going to argue that, well, Hillary didn't mean to, even if she did anything and we don't think that she actually did, it's not a case, that's not going to convince enough Americans to be like, oh, yeah.
It's just baloney. I mean,
it is.
Yeah.
She set up a private server, in her house, and she's doing all the state's business through her own server. She wasn't even doing it through the State Department, security. She just did it on her own because she again, it's like she feels like she can get away with whatever she wants. I mean, it's
The
funny
rules
to
don't
say,
apply.
get away
Right.
with murder because, I mean,
Ooh.
she has, so probably.
We could go around the circle about all the corruption. Like we know it's there. And even if you look at who's covering this case for CNN, these are people fired by for the CIA for doing illegal activity, but now they're covering the Trump thing. So you could go around and around and around. What's the solution? Is there something that Congress can do to make sure documents are safe? Is there something? Do we have to fire everyone in the FBI? Like, what is an actual way forward here so that we can start seeing, blind justice again?
Well, I think the problem with this one is that, if Trump would have just given up the documents like Mike Pence had done, it would have been a lot better. And he probably wouldn't have had charges put up against him. So he made it more difficult. Again, I think, he's just kind of blasé about things sometimes, and I think that can have consequences. So it just made it that much more difficult, I think, to return to a two-tier justice system. I mean, to return to get rid of the two-tier justice system and go back to rule of law. But I don't know. We'll see. I don't have a good answer.
Yeah, tough situation. It's kind of hard because a good portion of America, as we've talked about, feels so disenfranchised and like they're targeted all the time. And so you can, no matter what you say to these people, they're going to be on Trump's side. They're going to be mad. They'll defend whatever he does. And I think there's also, that's not right? Like, you shouldn't just give someone a blank check. But at the same time, the persecution's not just either. So it's so hard, like, to give a pill that would solve all these problems because it's really a self-created issue in a lot of ways. Like, maybe you just shouldn't have gone after these people, demonize them. I mean, I saw that KJP, the press secretary, just got like a violation of the Hatch Act slap on the wrist because she's using.
I didn't think she deserved that, actually, and I don't like her, obviously, one bit, but.
Why? So, okay, for clarity, she got a violation of that Hatch Act, like slap on the wrist for saying ultra MAGA in regards to describing part of the country. Why do you think she didn't deserve that?
She's a spokesman for the president of the United States, and it's pretty obvious that she's in that role for that reason, to speak on his behalf. And the president and the vice president are exempt from the Hatch Act. It doesn't cover them. The idea is it covers all other employees, and that's why people say, well, it involves her. No, it just means that she can't say, she can't engage in direct political activity in her job per se, except to the extent that she's acting as a spokesman for a person who can. So I didn't think that was a violation of the Hatch Act. I mean, I don't like her at all. I think she's doing a terrible job too.
And just to be clear, what is the Hatch Act for people who don't know?
Yeah, so the Hatch Act, the idea behind it is it was passed like in the 30s, and it makes it so that government employees can't be involved in political activity. So let's say you're a member, you work for the Department of Treasury, right? You can't just, or the post office or whatever, you can't wear political buttons at your job. You can't go to the political conventions. You can't run for office on your own. You're supposed to be a civil servant, serve the public in your job. You're not supposed to be engaged in campaign activity. You can give money to a candidate if you want to, but like for the most part, you're not supposed to engage in partisan activities because it could be seen as going against what your job is. Because before that, we had the spoilage system where you would get elected, let's say, and then you would fill, as president, you'd fill all the positions of the federal government, including down to postmasters everywhere, with people who are in your political party, right? And so we said, well, we want a nonpartisan government, so let's get rid of that. So what that meant is that it's a permanent Democratic class. But the idea is, see, my dad was a postmaster, and he could never go. They were, hey, why don't you come to the political convention? I can't go. I'm a postmaster. I can't go to So they made some changes to the Hatch Act, like in 1988 or so. But for the most part, you still can't do political campaign activity if you're a federal employee. Now, the president and the vice president, because they're elected by the people, they are not part of the Hatch Act. So every once in a while, someone's like, say Biden or Trump, they're violating the Hatch Act. It doesn't apply to them. They are a political person. They are elected. So it's meant to be for the bureaucrats that they're not. But it's just hilarious because they don't do campaign activity, but they do the bidding and the will of the Democratic Party all day long anyway. So,
and this has been another lesson in politics from Joshua Mercer. Thank you. The best. But we got to keep it moving here. But we have good news to report. So the bishops, actually, the USCCB, has done something good. I want to give them credit. We usually give them a hard time. I want to give them credit. I think they're doing something really good here. And what I'm talking about is they released a memo, and the memo is called, or a directive rather, called Moral Limits to Technological Manipulation of the Human Body. And recently, as of March, they released that. And then this week, they're actually voting on that directive. And so it's actually speaking directly to Catholic healthcare in how Catholic hospitals relate to the transgender surgery issue. And when I'm talking about surgery, I'm talking about sex change surgeries. I'm talking about, I want to be very clear, because critics of this have kind of attacked it as, well, it's gender affirming care that they're keeping from people not allowing Catholic hospitals to do. That's not what's going on. We're talking about sex change surgeries. We're talking about hormones given to kids. So really serious, life-changing, completely life-altering events that would be done in Catholic hospitals. So it is really good to have a pastoral attempt to explain, okay, as a Catholic hospital, this is what you can and can't do. It hasn't been updated in a really long time. And so now the bishops are coming forward and amending this. And so, of course, it's kind of riled people up. But the bishops, I read through it. I thought it was really excellent pastoral. It referenced a lot of what past popes have said. It referenced what Pope Francis has said about it. And so they're voting on it this week. Erica, you did a little bit more research. I did a little bit of research, but I want to know why is this so important that the USCCB has come out and actually made a very public statement on this type of healthcare?
It's really important because there's a document called the Religious and Ethical Directives for Catholic Healthcare. And this is sort of the document that governs Catholic healthcare institutions that use the term, the name Catholic or claim to be Catholic in their mission, in their name, etc. And this is authoritative guidance. Canonically, the bishops govern, and it's the American bishops coming together and saying these directives are called ERDs, and the bishops are saying this as a unified body is how the Catholic Church administers healthcare to the sick and the poor. And the reason why it's so important, like you said, Tom, is that it hasn't been updated in a very long time. And as we all know, the world has changed slightly in the last 25 years. And issues like, well, we're going to do, genital surgery or top surgery, not just on children. And that's what's really neat about this. It's, obviously children is something that, all of the country can get behind, but they're saying, even adults, we're not even going to do this to consenting adults because it is diametrically opposed. It is an intrinsically evil and unjust act to try and help someone change their sex. And why? Why is that so? And again, like you said, the way that they frame it is very pastoral and very loving, and it's in the context of a positive Catholic anthropology. And it's giving people language to speak about this, not as like, oh, here's the church with its rules and they're banning, gender affirming care, which is the way the National Catholic Reporter characterized this in their write-ups.
If I could read the headline.
Oh, yes, please do. Yes.
U.S. bishops consider banning transgender care at all American Catholic hospitals.
Yeah, right. He got called out for it too.
Let's play spot the bias. The bias. Yeah.
And Brian Fraga's his response to it is, I'm just going with the guidelines of the Associated Press.
Yeah.
Like, you know what? That's why at Catholic Vote we don't use the AP guidelines when it comes to gender because they've lost their mind.
It's insane.
They have. And for anyone out there who's like, oh, the AP, it's objective, neutral reporting. It's not neutral. Brian Fraga, it is not neutral. It is an agenda that's trying to get people to think in terms of these euphemisms for telling people, oh yeah, we can medically change your sex. You can't.
But you're right though. Like, it's a lie. The bishops get attacked for using ban and strict and outlaw. Okay. Hilarious to me that they say that this is the framework. Of course it's the framework, It's always the bishops are banning, the church is banning us from being able to actualize what we want. No, actually what's going on here is the bishops are standing up for people who are going to get victimized by $1 billion industry that cares about not the person, but the profits. There's a lot of money to be made on this whole transition stuff, and it doesn't help people. So the bishops are standing strong for people to prevent them from being victimized by the transgender corporations, all these companies that make so much money on this transition stuff. It's corruption.
And I don't think that can be overstated, that the language from National Catholic Reporter, like you said, it frames it as the bishops are attacking people. They're not allowing them to live their truth. They're not allowing them to express themselves. And people are going to die because of this. There'll be suicides, etc. And it's completely the reverse, Josh, like you're saying, that the loving thing to do is to help people to live the truth. The opposite of which would be like, let's inject you with chemical puberty blockers. Let's, cut off your breasts if you're a healthy woman, etc. And I think that it's so important that Catholics just not buy into or allow that kind of narrative to be pushed on them.
The Catholic left says the bishops need to listen. They always say the bishops need to listen to transgender voices, which means basically shut up, don't do anything unless you do what we say you do. It's like, wait a minute. I mean, if you want the bishops to have an authentic conversation, that would mean the bishops should listen to transgender voices, sure, and that transgender voices should also, I don't know, listen to the bishops too. Like, I don't know, crazy idea. Maybe Catholics should also listen to their shepherds, and feel free to call them out if you think they're wrong. But like, it should be a two-way conversation. But it's never that way with the communists. It's like, no, you listen to me.
Well,
okay.
The frustrating thing about this is that these are the people that anytime that conservatives speak up about stuff that they disagree with, they're like, oh, well, you're not submitting to authority. Like you're actually, you don't
Like the
respect the Pope's
TLM.
authority. You don't
Yeah,
respect
yeah.
any of these bishops' authority. But as soon as it comes to bishops that think a little bit differently than they do, it becomes, well, you're not listening to us. Like it's insane. But Erica, I mean, you've made a lot of good points, but I want to bring up too, like not only is this an industry problem, right? Of like you're giving money to these corporations that are taking advantage of people.
Mhm.
This is that is not a Catholic understanding. Being transgender, period, is not a Catholic understanding of the human body. And the bishops did such a good job. I just want to encourage everyone, go read this document. I was shocked when I was reading through at how well written it was, how pastoral it was. They reference past popes. But I have a few things here, specifically from Pope Francis. He said, as Pope Francis taught, young people in particular need to be helped to accept their own body as it was created. For, quote, thinking that we enjoy absolute power over our own bodies turns, often subtly, into thinking that we enjoy absolute power over creation. An appreciation of our body as male or female is also necessary for our own self-awareness in an encounter with others different from ourselves. In this way, we can joyfully accept the specific gifts of another man or woman, the work of God the Creator, and find mutual enrichment. I mean, this is coming right from Pope Francis. And if you were to only read stuff from Twitter or stuff from left-leaning Catholic outlets, you would think that Pope Francis is wholesale endorsing transgender surgeries, which clearly not the case. I mean, he's called it ideological colonization. He's been very clear that this is not, first off, it's not Catholic, and second of all, it's not good. And so it just it frustrates me that we have, people within the church, specifically Father James Martin Outreach Ministries, which we're going to talk a little bit more about later, that are just twisting really thoughtful commentary from our bishops, from our leaders, into something that it's not. Because if you read through the document, it's very clear that is not a Catholic understanding
Yeah, I
of
mean,
this
the
issue.
Catholic left will agree with Pope Francis on climate change, on economics, but on this, when it comes to, calling out transgender surgery, all that kind of stuff as exploitative and an attack on human integrity and the human person, total crickets. They just totally ignore. That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I keep reading through this document, and it keeps shocking me that there's even debate about this. I mean, so they're
Well, I
going to vote
mean,
on it.
good for the bishops. Good for
Right.
the bishops that they're not sitting on this. Like they talked about it earlier this year, as you mentioned, and that they said we're working on this because obviously, there's a lot of Catholic hospitals all across the country, and we want to make sure, like because some Catholic hospitals might be like, well, if it doesn't say we can't do it, then they'll start doing it. It's like, no. We're going to make sure these hospitals stay Catholic.
Yeah.
So it's good for the bishops to step up.
Yeah,
It's
and
time
Absolutely.
to meet the
And-
challenge.
And so specifically to critics of the bishops and people twisting words. So Outreach Ministries, we've talked about it a few times on here. It's a Father James Martin initiative, a Catholic resource to LGBTQ Catholics, as it self-proclaims. And you'll notice a pattern. They basically take sexual identity, make it the entire identity, and then criticize how the Catholic Church is not acknowledging that. And so we decided at CatholicVote, that's just not an acceptable. People need to know the truth about what's going on there, about what they're pushing, about what their angle is. And so we have a very talented writing staff. We actually wrote an expose on the website itself, on a lot of their writings. And it was I want to say it wasn't easy to put together because, of course, like we have great writers here. But if you scroll through some of these articles, it becomes immediately clear what's going on here is wrong and problematic. So what we have is we have the expose. We'll put it in the show notes. Take a read through. I want everyone to understand what outreach is, especially if you have people in your lives that maybe are going through gender dysphoria, maybe are confused about sexuality, what the purpose of it is, maybe going through some changes in puberty, whatever. This research is toxic. It's an absolute toxic thing to give to people. So we want to provide proper guidance and counseling when it comes to people struggling with these issues. We want to actually give good advice and sound theology to people struggling with that. And this is not it. So go check it out. It's really interesting.
Yeah, it's really great. Our writers did an amazing job investigating this, and it's pretty thorough, so it's long. And just on a positive note, to preview, I actually had the opportunity to interview on her Twitter handle is Anna Kate Who Loved God Late, and she is a same-sex attracted woman who has had a massive conversion to the Catholic faith. And on the positive end of things, yeah, she part of her mission is to debunk the narrative of people like Father James Martin and outreach ministries, but on the positive angle to find ways to minister to those struggling with same-sex attraction as their particular cross that they've been given in life. And so I would really encourage everyone to check that interview out when it drops.
Yeah, that's such a great example of it's so interesting to me talking to people who, it must be so hard to do this, but are very public about having same-sex attraction. And it's got to be such a cross to carry. And so by talking to her, I feel like even myself, it was so nice to hear from someone who is studying theology, she's studying to be a theologian, to understand from her perspective, what are the proper ways, what are people getting wrong on both sides? And it was just so illuminating. I mean, you laugh, you cry. It was one of the best interviews I think we've done here. It was fantastic. Erica, I think, shed a few tears, but that will be coming out
I might
very
have.
soon. So yeah, it's just so cool. We have opportunities to get to talk to people who the church is so diverse and unique, and to hear that kind of perspective was just so illuminating to me. I'm just so proud that we're able to put that out.
Yeah.
So that's
Well,
the outreach. Or go ahead.
The outreach, I was thinking about the expose that we did on outreach, and I don't know if you saw it. The Pope Francis sent a note to Father James Martin
Yeah.
this week. Said, "I send my best regards to the members of the meeting at Fordham University. Thank you for delivering to them. In my prayers, the good wishes are you and all who are working at the outreach conference."
I think Pope Francis did
So-
not see our expose.
So maybe we should mail it to the Vatican.
I think we should
What do
mail
you
it to
think?
him.
Just send it to him.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Let's do it. All right. Hey, and just before we leave the sort of church corner here, I wanted to also say, the U.S. bishops also in a massive sort of really unusual move this week. They came out with a really strong statement against
Okay, you guys are giving them such a hard time. It's
What?
like they finally did something good.
Okay,
I mean,
I'll back up.
stop it.
Okay.
They've been on a roll lately, and we're loving it. Okay.
All right, we'll back it up.
No, I'm
All right.
keeping that in, man. We got to keep that.
No. He's right.
No,
He's
they're
right.
good. I mean, it's good. It's good.
It is good.
Yeah.
It is good.
Proud of the
Yeah.
bishops.
I'm
Not all of
I'm
them.
happy to be proud of them.
Yeah,
Okay?
for sure.
This is good.
I will back it up. I'll
For sure,
back
for
it
sure.
up. All right. All right. So before we leave church corner, I did just also want to mention that, we talk about outreach, we talk about these horrible things that are happening as blasphemies against our Lord and Our Lady. The bishops have also called this week on the Feast of the Sacred Heart for all Catholics to pray the Litany of the Sacred Heart in reparation for sins against the Church and against Jesus Christ. So I would encourage everyone listening to go check that out.
What did they
They
specifically mention?
mention it because
And-
of a major league team honoring an organization that's blaspheming our Lord and Our Lady.
Yeah.
They didn't mention
Right.
Dodgers by name, but it's obvious what they meant.
Right.
So kudos to them.
No,
That
they
was
was great.
pretty
specifically
clear.
mentioned them. And I thought that was key because the
Mhm.
most frustrating thing to me is when people make obtuse statements and not mentioning actual concrete evil that's happening in
See,
front of
they're on a
everyone's
roll.
faces.
What I tell you, baby. They're on
Yeah.
a
They're
roll.
on a
on a
roll.
roll. And hey, special shout out. The Pillar just dropped 3 names: Archbishop Timothy Broglio, Cardinal Timothy Dolan, and Archbishop Jose Gomez, the Archbishop of Los Angeles. Said these 3 men in particular put the statement forward, got the other bishops on board. So shout
On
out
a
to
roll.
those 3. Thank you for being our shepherds. Amen.
Speaking of not on a roll, so
Ooh.
quick baseball update. I
Good
mean,
transition. Good
we
transition,
made
Tom.
we've made a clip on this. We made it a part of our episode. I think it was my Twilight Zone. I'm not sure. So Anthony Bass, if you recognize the name, he is a pitcher for the Blue Jays, and what he kind of got on the map for was I think he liked or shared a message in support of the boycott against Target for, I don't know,
And Bud Light,
working with a Satanist, making clothing that targets young kids and confusing their gender. Seemed pretty reasonable to me. However, he was made to have a struggle session, as it were, in front of a media, basically apologizing to the LGBTQ community, saying that he's going to undergo education. I mean, it was the most
It was groveling.
emasculating, groveling apology I've ever seen. Like, I would just rather.
It's painful.
Josh said he would actually rather die than give that apology.
Direct quote.
So anyway, he's back on because the and this is a great lesson, and you do not apologize to people that hate you. The Blue Jays were going to make him catch the first pitch at Pride Night. Notice he's not a catcher; he's a pitcher actually. But as a part of his apology campaign, he was going to catch this first pitch, and I was like, "Gosh, they keep pounding this guy. Like he can't catch a break." And then unfortunately, he has been cut now officially by the Blue Jays after latest LGBTQ comments. Yeah, so poor guy. I mean,
Yeah.
partially poor guy, but also at the same time, I mean, my guy, like you can't. This is
Yeah,
a great
it's a
example.
morality tale. Do
This is
not
a larger
apologize.
story, right?
Yeah.
The larger story is these people, they're a small group of activists that hate you. And it doesn't matter what you do, because according to their worldview, you are an oppressor, you're whatever type of label they want to give you in the intersectionality.
But here's the thing that I think to
bingo.
take away from this, Tom. He's an athlete. I mean, when you play for the major leagues, you get like a minimum $1 million a year. So these guys are making great money. And he still gets on the chopping block for what he said. So what does that tell you about everyone who has a basic corporate job? Like, you can't say, yeah, I don't think I want to shop at Target anymore because I don't believe in that kind of tuck stuff. Then you could get fired. I mean, like, it's just, to me, it's insane. It's insane. We used to have a robust, appreciation for the true First Amendment, and that you could have opinions and just agree to disagree. But now the left has really this authoritarian streak, and it's not necessarily always government imposed. It's imposed, at your employment. And it's like, if I'm working in a cubicle and I'm working on TPS reports, what does it matter if I share my opinion on, I don't know, I don't think the Dodgers should honor an anti-Catholic hate group, or I don't think Target should have a Satanist, and I don't think Bud Light should have put that weirdo on a can. And like, you get fired. It's like, so it's a chilling see, the left always talked about this for decades, the chilling effect on speech. And it's happening every day now, and the left doesn't care because they like it. So again, the left, they hold us so hard to all the principles, but then when it gets turned around on them, they just completely abandon it. They don't care.
Yeah. Don't play the game.
Duplicitous.
I guess
don't play the game.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's the game. Those are the rules, and don't play by them because you'll lose.
It's Calvin ball, right?
Yeah, Calvin ball. Yeah. Okay, so we have an extra special Twilight Zone. For anyone that was following any internet, you probably saw some things you wish you didn't see. And we need an extended Twilight Zone segment. Josh opined that he wouldn't have the time to talk about it. I'm giving him the time because it's crazy and he deserves it. So Josh, what did you bring to the table this week?
Take it away.
Well, this week, we had the White House put out the three flags. Sometimes they'll do that outside the White House, and he walks out, gives a speech to get the three flags. Well, instead of the one that's front and center was the pride flag. And I just thought to myself, that is totally what establishing a state religion looks like, And I just thought to myself, I mean, could you imagine if a truly Catholic president put, like, I don't know, a flag of the Sacred Heart, or maybe an image of Our Lady of
Vatican
Guadalupe?
flag. Yeah.
That people would lose it, right? They would totally lose it. And I just, again, it speaks to this idea that, like the cities, a lot of these major cities have painted the pride flag on streets, signs. And so it's an absolute, to me, obvious thing where the LGBT sex cult has become the official state religion. And, they've got their symbols, like with the flags and stuff like that. And, with the president doing there. And I just think we need a separation of pride and state. I think it's time.
New amendment to the Constitution.
You
Separation of pride and state.
No pride flags at the White House, not in our embassies all across the world.
Josh, but that's what was most offensive to you out of that event?
Whew.
It's not I'm just saying, like, I try to instill on people, like, understand that this is not just a fad or a movement. Like, this whole pride stuff is obviously a religion. It is, it's become this thing where, like, the left was saying, we just got to get past, Christianity and past all religion, and then man will be so much freer and smarter and all that stuff. It's like, no, you just adopted a new religion, and it's this pride religion where it's like the most important thing about you is your sexual impulses, and somehow you feel the need to tell everyone in the world about them when I'd rather not know.
Right. And I think what Tom's referring to.
Yeah,
there was other
speaking of
crazy
telling
stuff
the
that
world,
went on.
Or showing the world, rather.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there was the whole ceremony at the White House that people were,
Topless.
flashing themselves.
Bingo.
And actually, the White House
Yeah.
was forced to actually put out a statement condemning it because they were so embarrassed that it went crazy.
That's how you know, man. Like, yeah, they had a transgender influencer. It was a biological man who surgically made herself to appear like a woman. Who
Himself.
went and himself. Sorry, gotta be.
It
it's
gets
so
confusing.
So confusing because there was people that had changed into a woman or appeared as a woman, and then there's people who changed themselves to appear as though as a man, and then regardless, they made a social media like a TikTok, and then they flashed the camera on the White House grounds in front of children. Like this was a all ages event at the White House, and it got so much blowback online that the White House itself had to be like, yeah, everyone in that video is banned and no longer allowed. And that's also kind of an interesting thing that we could discuss here. So I didn't even feel comfortable sharing that internally on our side channel.
I'm just thinking 15 years from now, a future Democratic president is going to apologize to the people that were kicked out, right? That's like
they're going to apologize for Biden's indiscretion. Yeah.
And invite them back. Hey, get naked. Get naked on
have a strip show.
South Lawn. Let's go.
Right. They'll be naked with them, probably.
They'll be martyrs,
okay.
They'll get their postage stamps, right?
Jeez. I sure hope not. I sure hope not.
So just wait for the Twilight Zone in 2043.
Yeah, check back in here. Check back in here.
Heard it here first.
This is actually something I want both of your opinions on. So I didn't even feel comfortable sharing that in an internal Slack channel. Like these are private Slacks between employees because it was so graphic and gross. But obviously is a major news event. I mean, the White House had to apologize for it. What do you say to people? And we get this, I feel like we get this at the Loop a lot. We have to share kind of grotesque stuff sometimes. We have to talk about grotesque stuff. And there's one side of that where people are like, well, stop giving it the spotlight. Stop. We don't want to see it. You're just giving it more visibility and it's gross. No one should see it. And then there's the other side. It's like, well, this is actually happening and you need to see how gross it is. It kind of reminds me of like the abortion debate of like showing aborted babies, like the debate on that. Like, should you show? Should you not show? What do you think in this case?
It's similar, but I think they're different. But with regards to this, what we usually do at the Loop is we try to be forthright and honest about what's going on, but we always have like a disclaimer at the top of the article. This article contains descriptions of, obscene material. And if you're not out for that, you don't have to read this article, in other words. And then in the article, we make the descriptions of it and describe what's going on in a way that's not trying to violate your conscience or your dignity or whatever. And then sometimes if there's a photo of something, we'll say, if you really want to see this, you can click here, and we won't pick the most egregious, nastiest photo, but we don't put it like right in the middle of the article. You're like, oh my gosh, yuck.
Yeah,
we don't want to do that to people either, because it's like, you just want to know what's going on and understand it. And so I think we take a lot of care to say, we don't want to, we observe and read a lot of this stuff, so you don't have to. And if you want to know, well, actually, no, I want to see what that person did on the South Lawn. Like, okay, well, then there's the link for that, but,
wouldn't recommend.
Well, and
not necessarily recommend it, but it's just understanding, like, I don't want to abuse the reader.
Right.
Exactly. And like give them the information that they need and the resources they need if they want to dig deeper. I do think that, conservatives on Twitter were especially like, oh my gosh, we're posting porn and blah, blah, blah. And yeah, to an extent, there's that element of, okay, do we want to propagate or proliferate these images online? And I think we have to do it in the way Josh described, equipping people to avoid or see them. But I think conservatives also underestimate the level of denial that is still out there about what's actually being presented to the American public and to children in particular, but just anyone, right?
Completely agree.
And like I was doing a story this week on the Connecticut, the local news. They just threw a fit because Hide the Pride is showing up in Connecticut cities and towns, and it was pretty amazing to cover this. But all the local reporters, I mean, they would just say so-called pornographic materials, which are not pornographic. Or you would have librarians say, we don't have any nudity in our children's section. And then you literally just take a screenshot of the inside of one of these books and there are naked children in it. Or there are people in sex acts. And the
And we
level
blur that stuff out, but you can
we
tell what's
do,
going
like,
on.
let's blur it
Right.
all
Just
out.
be
Like,
clear for our
right.
listeners.
And we
Yeah.
didn't post the pictures, but they're there. You can find them. You could go to your library and look at them. But the level of denial among even like my nice parishioner friends who I was talking to after, a certain picnic this last weekend, that's not happening. We don't have that. You're overreacting against
It would
something.
be
So
inconvenient for me if that were true.
yes, exactly.
Yeah, no,
My brain
I
would
think
break.
some people, I mean, I know you're probably joking about that, but I really do think that it kind of takes advantage of people's goodwill nature. Like, I think most people just don't want to believe
Right.
that's happening. And it's maybe, I don't even know if it's as much like convenient, non-convenient. I just think most people tend to default to giving people the benefit of the doubt.
Mhm.
And I have to say too, like to Erica's point, it's gross. I don't like seeing it, but I think it's more important. The most convincing and most persuasive arguments are just showing people what's happening. I think what really broke the dam for the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence was when I believe it was Megan Basham got the first one. I'm not sure who got this, but it was the video of the pole dancing on the cross. And even just hearing me say it, it just enrages me. It's disgusting. But it was impossible to watch that video and not understand why people were upset. It was the most damning smoking gun video I've ever seen. And so I think it's important, actually. If that was censored to the point where you didn't see visually what was going on, I don't think people would be as upset or better in the know. And the same thing goes for these children's books. Like, if you aren't showing the books, then why would people be as upset as they should? People aren't as upset as they actually should be if you don't show the full. And I don't think you need to do that for everything, but I
Mhm.
think
Or
with
for
Well,
things
just
everyone.
that natural
important enough-
tendency not to try to interfere with other people and like, well, I raised my kids different, da da da. And you're like, look at this book. Look,
Yeah.
you think this book should be in a public library? You think 5-year-olds should be able to pick this one up? I mean, really?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I do think it just being able to be upfront and transparent, it does help move the needle and people understand this is not acceptable.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I've seen so many examples of that too, like in broader culture. Like, for example, with that, the subway thing with Daniel Penny, who just came out and talked about what happened. Until video was shown of that, the way that it was being spun was that he was some vigilante looking for trouble, looking to hurt people. And as soon as you saw the video, you see three people restraining the guy. It just became so obvious. Like, that's not what was happening. And then now you hear Daniel Penny's side, and he's like, yeah, he told people he'd kill them, and he doesn't care if he dies or goes to jail. I'm like, that's a serious threat. Like, so I think that's why actually Twitter, I think, has been actually, it's hard in some ways because it is a little bit, it's easy
It's
to
a food
disassociate.
fight.
Right, because you see so much bad stuff, it almost kind of numbs you to like what bad stuff is. And like, of course, I wish that wasn't the case. But at the same time, you're seeing what's actually like the truth. There
Mhm.
has to be a middle ground in there, I think, but it's important that people see the truth. Transparency is
Yeah,
key.
and I think to like avoid the numbing, this is why I'm so grateful to be in journalism while I'm also raising kids, because it forces me to pull out of the muck, throughout the day. I have to go like, oh, look at this bug in the grass, Mom, or I painted this really awful picture that you're gonna love, and like it's really important, I think, for people whose job is to report on the muck, and I'm talking to all the reporters and journalists out there who don't do this, that you really need to get back into the good, the true, the beautiful, and like a good, happy human life, because that also it gives purpose to looking through the worst of what people can do and produce and what they're trying to do to children. And it gives you a real perspective on why you're fighting. You're not fighting because like you're part of the Trump tribe, and you're not fighting because, this is just my what I do, and I'm frustrated and I'm angry all the time. But you're actually fighting for these kids who you're raising and for their innocence, and for a world where more kids have an innocent childhood.
That's a really
So,
profound insight. And I think that actually speaks to the difference between parties right now. I think if you look at most of the activists left side of the aisle, they are childless women in their 30s. And if you didn't have children, I mean, the children are literally the best of us. They represent the future. They represent possibility. They're it's just I don't know. I have a young kid,
they
so I'm a
love
little
junk
biased, but
food.
like,
I mean,
yeah,
they're
like
just
he does I was just laughing with my wife. Like, my kid does the tiniest thing, and I think it's just the funniest or greatest thing ever. And like in reality, yeah, he just like rolled over, and I thought it was hilarious. But it just does like really renew you for. I think it also shapes. That's why I mean, gosh, people are going to accuse me or whatever, but I think that political
New
leaders
dad.
should be
Yeah.
political leaders should be
You're still the same way, Josh, with your
age
kid.
bearing. They should have young kids, and they should be because they think about politics differently. That's
Yeah.
and you know what, you're going to extrapolate, you know, which candidate has young kids or whatever. I'm like,
Oof.
I'm not saying I support anyone. I'm just saying philosophically, you think about the world differently when you have young kids and you're raising a family, because you need to think about the future.
Well,
It's just
actually,
different
Yeah.
than
you know,
someone thinks about it elsewhere.
it's interesting though, because like, you know, John Roberts, Brett Kavanaugh, Amy Barrett, they all have children. Like before those three came on the court, most of the people on the court, all of their children had already been adults, and there was not children that they're raising in the home. They weren't actually actively parenting, you know, children. And so I do think that helps provide perspective, because everyone's like, oh, we got to make sure the court's diverse. It's not just, you know, having, everyone always gets obsessed with diversity about, you know, sex
color of your
and
skin,
race.
yeah.
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 It's like, you know, you should also have, it'd be nice to have like a non-lawyer on the court. It'd be nice to have someone who, you know, is, and there used to be a lot more veterans that were on the court. There's different ways of looking at like different experiences. Now they're all Harvard and Yale. I mean, it's, come on.
Except Amy Coney
Anyway.
Barrett.
Yeah. No,
Yeah, I know. We finally got one.
we finally got one.
We finally
All
go.
Erica, we move it to your Twilight Zone.
Oh, Twilight Zone. Well, here we go. Johns Hopkins University, one of the most respected institutions in the country until recently. Their diversity and inclusion, gender and sexuality resource was published this week, and it included a glossary of LGBT terms. Now, I'm going to read specifically from how they define. Actually, I'm going to go with two definitions that they offer us here. We're going to go with gay man and lesbian. So let's just take a look on how they define gay man first. Quote, a man who is emotionally, romantically, sexually, affectionately, or relationally attracted to other men. And it goes on and on. It's talking about like how gay has been used in the past. So that's a gay man. Lesbian, a non-man attracted to non-men.
Wait a second.
While
you
past
say non-man?
definitions refer to lesbian as a woman who's emotionally, romantically, blah, 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 other women, this updated definition includes non-binary people who may also identify with the label. So I loved J.K. Rowling, famous for Harry Potter. You can say what you will about Harry Potter, whatever. But J.K. Rowling had a great tweet on this. She said, man, no definition needed. Non-man, formerly known as woman, being definable only by reference to the male, an absence, a vacuum where there's no man-ness. It was just priceless. So the erasure of woman by Johns Hopkins University.
Such a good Twilight Zone from our non-man, our resident non-man on the
Our
podcast.
resident non-man. That's
Really,
me. I'm your non-man.
That was
I
a
love
great
being
one.
I love being defined as a deficient male. I think that's one of the common attacks on Aristotle is, well, he said women were deficient males. It's a little more nuanced than that, people. Aristotle never said something simple in his life, so get over it. But I have now claimed my label as a non-man. I will not be sending my children to Johns
Congrats.
Hopkins University. That's disgusting.
Okay, not to keep harping on him, but Johns Hopkins, there's a lot of people that treat that like God's honest truth.
Yeah.
This is like the AP. Are you serious, man? Like, can we just maybe revolve debates around truth? And like, if you see something that's not true, then don't use it. Like, can we think a little bit beyond what organization says what is true and what's not true? Like,
Yeah.
is anyone paying attention? Like, you cannot use certain things as sources anymore. It's just not possible.
Yeah, I won't be using Johns Hopkins glossary of LGBT terms with my kids in the homeschool. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
Oh,
Speaking
It's
of,
pathetic.
speaking of,
I knew it was time to log off Twitter last night when I gotta go find it.
that sounds like a meme. I knew it was time to log off Twitter.
All right.
One,
So
take it away.
So Reuters shot out. Study says renewables must ramp up 5 times faster to avert Thunberg's climate cliff, in quotes. And it has a picture of Greta Thunberg, who I guess is the authoritative source on science and the environment now. And I was like, that is absolutely enough. Like, I can't do any more on Twitter tonight. Oh gosh. Anyway, so my Twilight Zone, it was. I actually have a couple options here. One, the non-man, you already covered that. But this one was, so I think the kids are getting a little bit tired of having pride shoved down their throat. And so there was a middle school in Massachusetts that told kids to wear rainbow shirts for Pride months. And so they organized, the kids themselves organized somewhat of a boycott by wearing red, white, and blue and saying that my pronouns are USA. And
These
they
are like
That is
12-year-olds.
awesome.
I love 12 and 13-year-old kids in Massachusetts.
The
That's
future
awesome.
is looking bright.
The future is looking bright, my guy. So yeah, they took down some LGBT posters. They wore my pronouns are USA. And then the parents, unfortunately, some of them were just shocked and outraged at this protest. They're calling for more DEI programs, more education for the kids.
More
So,
education, re-education. Let's say what it is.
I was talking to on the interview with Kyle Seraphin about this. It's like the kids aren't punk rock anymore. You know, Rage Against the Machine used to kind of be the thing in the 90s. The kids are punk rock still, man. Like there's another video leaked about a video shown in math class with like
Oh my gosh, that was great.
two women kissing, and
Yeah.
the kids were booing. They were like, why are
They
we
like
watching
start
this
yelling,
garbage?
no,
And of course
not
the teacher's
again.
like,
Yeah.
that's so
Yeah.
disrespectful. Like, I'm going to keep you for summer school or whatever. The kids are just like, this is math class. Like, it's getting out of control. And I think even the kids are kind of like, yo, this is a little bit crazy.
It's
I
just
don't know.
sick.
There's where 1 + 1 does not equal 3.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, the kids are going to be okay, guys.
That's
And then-
not multiplication anymore.
if I could throw in a bonus Twilight Zone, Paul
Hey,
Ryan.
yeah.
Can you imagine the kids just like, actually, if you want to talk about multiplication, fruitful multiply, that's not how it works.
Kids are going to be all right. So bonus Twilight Zone, I have in the notes. I'm not sure which of you I can accuse of this, but we have Paul Ryan is an old, washed out sellout. So Paul Ryan went on CNN to
Oh
talk
my
about
gosh.
his hopes as presidential bid, and he said that he's not really a culture war guy. When asked about Bud Light and Target, I don't know, targeting children, he said he's more on cutting taxes, and he thinks people that focus on those, that there's just a distraction.
Yeah, I just think
So-
that's so gross. Like he's basically gaslighting his entire, like, the GOP. He's like, shouldn't be focused on culture war issues because they're quote unquote polarizing. Well, the polarizing thing is when they're showing these porn things and drag shows to small children. Those are the people who are polarizing, not the people who are trying to stop it. So
Classic
I mean, Paul
gaslighting,
Ryan,
yeah.
it's not 2002 anymore. Come
Yeah,
on.
Josh, weren't you
Just
a Paul
go
Ryan
retire.
fan? Not to point fingers, but were you a fan back in the day?
Yikes,
Paul Ryan?
Pogo. Going on there.
Well, I mean, 10 years ago, Paul Ryan was talking about, the need to be upfront and honest about how our entitlement programs are going to eventually go bankrupt. And he's right on that. But unfortunately, Romney, Ryan, and Mitch Daniels are of that milieu who just think that the culture war is a distraction from trying to fix these big problems like of entitlement spending and stuff like that. And the thing is, what they don't understand is that, like, that's what, Mitch Daniels had called for a truce, right? And Romney and the Romney-Ryan ticket in 2012 completely avoided talking about culture war issues at all.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the problem. The other side has not decided, oh, I guess then we won't try to push these culture war issues. It's like they're on the attack. They're the ones putting the stuff in our libraries. They're the ones that are putting the pride flags out on the White House lawn. They're engaged in culture war every day. And Paul Ryan's like, don't fight back. Like, what?
Yeah.
And we have governors
That
like
didn't
Ron
go well.
DeSantis, who's like, our universities have gone psycho-Marxist. Like, let's not have all this garbage. Let's reform it. And conservatives like, finally, someone's understanding. Like, you send your kids to college and they come back like a Marxist. You're like, something's not adding up. And we have finally some reformers who are trying to do something about this and are fighting back. And Paul Ryan's like, well, wait a minute. My life accomplishment was cutting the corporate tax rate, which is true. That's what he considers his life accomplishment in the Congress. It's like, buddy, sit down, shut up. The only reason CBS has you on your program is because you're attacking other Republicans who are finally doing something, finally starting to fight back. Like, I actually want a country, Paul. All he cares about is he's the Wall Street Journal kind of view that we're just in a parking lot with an economy. Like,
Yeah.
give me a break.
I got exactly the reaction I was hoping by bringing up Paul Ryan. Thank you for that, Josh.
Well played, Pogo.
Thank you.
That was awesome, Josh.
So that's been another episode of Loopcast. We enjoy making these so much for you guys. Thank you for all the support. Ways that you can help us: reviews, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts. You could also email us, loopcast@catholicvote.org. I've been enjoying kind of interacting with some of you. If you have any questions, any suggestions, would love to hear from you. Follow us on YouTube. We have all our episodes live on YouTube as well. Go ahead, subscribe to the channel. We've seen a lot of growth there. It's really encouraging. And we will see you next Thursday. Take care, guys.